Hello friends and welcome to my YouTube channel Simply Stocks, and today I'm going to talk about one of the sunrise sectors of the Indian industry, that is the aviation sector. So let's understand whether this sector is good enough to invest and whether you should invest at the moment or not. So let's get started. First of all, a disclaimer that this is not a stock recommendation. People taking any position into any share they should do their own due diligence and research, and I'm not in favor or against any company that I talk about. Now about the aviation sector, it is one of the fastest growing sector in India. In fact, in the last 6 to 8 years, it has grown by leaps and bounds, and it is considered that now the retail players are coming into the market. That is, the normal people of India are traveling by air rather than train or through the route of bus, and this is where everyone is very positive about, or the industry is very positive about the sector, that there will be a lot of revenue that would come through if people shift their lifestyle from traveling from train and then shifting towards traveling through air. And one needs to consider that in India, the amount of travel through air is very less compared to other developing or developed nations. Even if you look at other parts of Asia, the quantity is very less to the amount of people that travel by flights rather than by trains. So this all could change, and that is what has been expected. Over the next decade or so, that things would change and people would shift to more air travel rather than train or bus travel. Uh, Especially because of the increase in discretionary income of people, that would really aid the situation. But one needs to understand that at the moment there is a kind of a depression in the job market here in India, and that is going to hurt this sector the most. Apart from hotel and you can say hospitality industry, aviation sector would hurt, because of the kind of slowdown that the sector is currently facing. uh, Over the last 3 to 4 years, it had very good tailwinds with the kind of oil prices dipping to around 35 dollars per barrel, but it has now increased again. But that has really helped some of the companies get out of the mire. The ticket prices have kept on increasing, and we have seen that there have been gradual increase in ticket prices, and yet there have been increase in the number of passenger traveling by air, and that has really helped the sector and some of the companies to perform really well over the last 2 to 3 years. The infrastructure of airports across India have really improved over the last 10 to 15 years to what it was before. The BJP government has done a lot in this regard over the last 5 6 years to build up airport infrastructure in difficult terrains as well of the northeast and in the Himalayas. Now, what could hurt the sector, if one may look at? So, these were the positives that I just mentioned, but what could be the points that could hurt the sector as a whole? The biggest factor for the aviation industry is the ATF prices, which is directly linked to the oil or crude prices that is put forward in the US, the Brent and NYMEX crude. Now, the crude prices was hovering between $40 to $60 for a long period of time over the last 2.5 3 years, and that is where, or in that period, is when the aviation industry really enjoyed their best times. But now, with the escalating tensions in the Middle East, with the US Iran tensions and other factors coming in, the oil prices is now touching $280 now. It has gone past $70 and may touch $80 with the kind of escalation that is taking place. And once the oil prices go beyond 75 $80 per barrel, that would really hurt the sector badly, and we could see another slam dunk in the share prices of the aviation stock. So one needs to consider that. One needs to have an eye for all these aspects of global events when they are investing in this sector. Inflation would be another factor, although inflation has not gone out of hand. But if the inflation increases, eventually it would hurt the crude prices again, and that would rise. Uh, ATF prices directly linked to the crude prices again would continue to rise. Apart from that, companies also look at increasing ATF prices from time to time, and that directly impacts the revenue of the aviation stocks. Uh, Another thing is in manufacturing aircrafts, you need various types of plastics and materials, and there have been import duties imposed on these materials, and these import duties gets increased if the Indian government go more nationalistic, and these import duties increases, that would hurt the sector again. So it's not only oil prices but other raw material costs that could rise and hurt the sector completely. One needs to also remember that buying aircrafts is not easy. It's not like manufacturing. Buying aircrafts or manufacturing aircrafts or importing aircrafts is not as you would say cheap compared to manufacturing a bike or a car, and that's where there is high cost of capital, because these companies take in a lot of loans and then start a business. In starting an aviation business is one of the toughest things across the globe, and hence these companies are always under debt. There are some companies that are in less debt, and there are others like Kingfisher, etc., that are burdened with loads of debts, and eventually they vanish in difficult circumstances. So, higher cost of capital will always remain, because the interest rates are not going to go down to zero here in India. In fact, the interest rates, I would be surprised if they go down below 6%, 5.5%. Uh, so repo rate and all. So one needs to have an understanding of this, that when you are investing in such a company, such an industry, then these things will always be, these riders will always be there. What could be the impact on stocks of such things? Well, volatility will always be there. There would be some news coming up of ATF. There will be news coming up of escalating tensions abroad. There could be some news of airports prices being hiked, or import duties, as I mentioned. So one news or the other, and most probably bad news for the sector would keep coming in. There are very less good news that come in. I have looked at the aviation sector over the last 4 5 years, and this is what happens. So good news would only be if the crude prices keeps on going down, or the import duties on plastics or other raw materials could go down, but that could happen once in 4 5 years. But every 2 3 months you'll know, or you'll hear about the rise in crude prices, or rise in plastic prices, rise in ATF prices, and escalation abroad, and so on and so forth. It and hence it is very hard to analyze forward earnings of these companies. You can project, even if you look at the best company in this sector which is listed, that is the Interglobe Aviation. Even for them to look at the earnings and think that the earnings would increase linearly would be foolish, and hence it is very difficult to invest over a long period of time in aviation purely on the fact that more people will travel by air would not help if the oil prices goes to 90 $95 per barrel, or other factors changes, or other factors change. So one needs to have an understanding about the commodity prices, and I believe this stock is more a commodity play than a consumer play, and it's all about the oil prices. If oil prices goes to close to $50 per barrel, this is a very good sector to buy. So if one have an understanding of where the oil would go, then he could make a lot of money investing in the or shorting this sector. And remember that only the best will survive, so it's not that all the stocks would survive, and I believe Interglobe Aviation would be the one company that one could look at investing. It could end up as a monopoly, so one needs to understand that as well. Interglobe might take all the market share along with SpiceJet or some other company. So, as I mentioned, it could end up being a monopoly or a duopoly. So, we could see Interglobe Aviation taking the major share and probably ending up as a behemoth in the aviation sector, or we could see Interglobe and SpiceJet coming out of the mire, and Jet Airways and Kingfisher, as I mentioned, has already fallen behind. So, we could see a scenario similar to what telecom today is, but it has taken around 7 years for telecom to come out of the troubles. In 2012 we were talking about having lower having higher competition with lower number of players in the sector, and by 2019 we have two and a half players at the moment. So we could see a 6 7 years churning in the aviation sector, and eventually some companies would come out. We don't know, we could have another firm coming out with aviation, you can say, aspiration, and that could do a lot better than these companies. So one has to be understanding of the fact that these factors could change very quickly in this sector. So what needs to be done? Well, you need to buy, well, you don't need to buy, but if you would like to buy in the aviation sector, probably buy the best and have strict stop losses, because even the best company in this sector which I have just mentioned have other you could say governance issues, and we have seen what has happened during that time, that the stock went down by around 30 40% in no time because of those issues, although company came out of it and eventually they are producing very good results. But these things keep on happening. It's a very volatile sector to be in. Look at only strong businesses in sector, that is a given. And whenever you make around 50 40 50 60% in a stock in the aviation sector, I believe you need to book profits rather than hold it for 3 4 5 years, unless something major changes in the aviation sector altogether. It is not a perennial sector. It has never been a perennial sector in any country, be it US, Europe, Japan, etc. People stay away from investing in such sector. Apart from few companies like Boeing, uh, there are not many stocks to invest in globally, even in this aviation space, because of the kind of volatility that this space has. So you need to have an understanding of that as well. What else? Well, it is not a perennial sector, as I mentioned, and keep track of all factors affecting oil prices. Unless you keep track of all the factors, you will never be able to uh, understand where the stock price would move, because rather than the profitability of a company or what has happened already with the company, people look at the future, the next 1 1.5 years, as to what lies ahead for the oil prices, for the ATF prices, and for the sector itself. So if possible, avoid the sector as a whole and look at other sectors rather than investing in aviation. But if you are investing in aviation, you have to take all these things into consideration. So this was my video on the aviation sector. Please like and subscribe my channel, hit the bell icon so that you can get my videos straight away when I post it. Thanks a lot.